Welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Kyle, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's second call during this corona pandemic that we've scheduled. We'll be doing these every Thursday night, probably for the duration of this time in which the world is hunkered down due to this coronavirus. We're planning on doing them just to reach out and connect with the grad base, and you can invite anybody to these calls. They don't have to be grads, anybody and everybody. And we're just really interested in connecting and doing our best to create value with you during these challenging times. Tonight, we have Ennio Salucci, which everybody knows, as one of our facilitators, and we're very happy to have Ennio on the mend and doing well physically after a broken shoulder and some other challenges a few months ago. Recently had surgery and is recovering from the surgery on his shoulder. So great to have you here, Ennio. He'll be one of our facilitators, and also Taylor Labarbera. Some of you may not know Taylor. Taylor is an apprentice trainer with us. She lives in the Phoenix, Arizona area with her husband, Nathan, and their two children. Taylor also is very involved in the work in that area, and she was a team captain for the last training we did there, which Austin and Patty Hamilton sponsored, and she's working her way towards sponsorship also, so she's very involved. And the two of them are going to talk to us about Everything is a Conversation. So take it away.
Well, thank you, Chris. So, even that title is a little bit funny, isn't it? Everything is a conversation. So those of you who have been to trainings have heard us talk about how our internal conversations very often orient us to be a certain way in life. So we're going to look to unpack that a little bit tonight. And we thought, what kind of topics can we engage in that would contribute to our mission, which is to create flourishing in life? And I think Everything is a Conversation is a great place to begin. So in a past natural Zoom gathering during this time, we talked about the resourceful way to shift resistance, and how just automatically resisting something the way we always do, because it, or if it's a person, they, aren't showing up the way you prefer, then you just don't engage, and it leaves you powerless, ineffective, and stuck. So here's the reality, though. There's always something that isn't showing up the way that we prefer. And don't worry, even when it is, it'll pass. So we've noticed that resistance when things are not the way they should be, it's a universal human tendency. Everywhere we go and do this work, we notice that. So what we'd like to focus on tonight is how all this gets established and takes hold, and shift it in ways that create flourishing instead. Now, it all begins with a conversation. It's a cumbersome statement, so I'd like to unpack it. First, I want to show you a quote, and I'm just going to take over the screen. It's a very short quote. All right, so share screen here. And here we go. I'm always in conversation with myself, and sometimes it involves other people. That's from Susan Scott, and it's a fascinating quote. I really love that quote. So let me stop sharing screen here.
It didn't share, Ennio.
I didn't share. Mm-hmm. Well, let me do it again. How's that?
That works.
Yeah. All right, I'm always in conversation with myself, and sometimes it involves other people. And that's Susan Scott. So now stop sharing. All right, so now, there's many reasons to have conversations. Think about it. Communicating something you need, communicating about something that's off, communicating in order to reconnect or connect for the first time, communicating a desire, communicating a frustration. There's many, many reasons to communicate. But what we don't really get is that even when we're not communicating, we're communicating. Some of you have heard me say in trainings, there's if verbal communication is 7 to 13%, whatever it is, our mood, our attitude, our posture, our way of being, our facial expressions, those are all communicating. And the real mischief is that we're always having an internal conversation that somehow expresses itself whether we talk about it or not. And there's a lot of conversations that we avoid, and perhaps those of you that have been really confined together are avoiding conversations. One may be, that you're afraid they'll get defensive, they won't be able to handle it, they don't want to talk about it, they'll get over emotional. And, the reasons go on and on for why you don't want to communicate something. But we're always in an internal communication all the time. So I just like to do a little exercise right now and just see what comes up for you, okay? So imagine, I'm going to read this because I wrote it down. Everyone close your eyes if you would for a minute. And imagine that you interview for and you get a new job that you're very excited about. It's a great job, all right? And it's a fairly large company. You get the job and you walk into the office on the first day and you get to the receptionist desk and you tell them your name, and without looking up, the receptionist gives you a directional map to your desk. And then you start to walk into the big room where everybody is, and in a loud, cheerful voice you say, "Good morning!" And no one looks up and no one says anything. So you go to work and you work all day. There's 40 or 50 people in there. So when you get home, your friend or your spouse asks you, "How was your day?" All right, so now with your eyes closed, how would you answer that question? How was your day? In fact, if any of you can, you could just go ahead and write that down. All right, now keep your eyes closed. The next day you go into the office, and as you walk through, people stand up and greet you, and they say, "Welcome, congratulations, you made it." That's a tradition that we have. It's hard for us to do, but it's a tradition with every new person that we come in. We just test them on the first day. We don't say anything, but you passed the test. Welcome, we're glad that you're here. All right, so now when you get home, again, your friend or your spouse asks you, "How was your day?" So just answer that question in your mind. Those of you that are writing, write it down. How was your day? All right, thank you. Go ahead and open your eyes. Now, just a couple of you. What did you think or write about the first day when no one looked up, no one said anything, you just worked your whole day, no one acknowledged you? What? Okay, go ahead. Who was talking?
I was, Leanne.
Leanne, go ahead. You said what?
Lonely.
Okay, so your day was lonely. Got it? Someone else.
My day was busy.
Your day was busy, meaning?
Yeah, I got busy to work and I worked all day. So I was busy all day. So I was busy.
Got it. All right, someone else.
I was thinking interesting, and then I'd probably was thinking, boy, I wonder what's going on.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Very good.
I would have considered not coming the next day.
You would have said what?
Considered not coming the next day.
I'm not coming the next day.
Yeah, I would just give it another try, and that's it.
All right. All right. Well, so I'm going to move on to the next day in a moment, but for not coming the next day, what was the internal conversation you had? What was wrong in your mind?
I'm not taking up with that stuff. Okay. Non-conversation. I'm not a lonesome rider here.
Okay, got it. All right, so what did some of you say about the second day?
I thought it was great. Everyone said I did a great job. I got feedback.
So you felt very different than the first day.
I did. I was smiling.
Okay, got it. Someone else.
I'd say this place is effed up.
Got it. What else?
I would say that I had like an angry day because I would be so angry.
The second day or the first day?
The second day.
Because of what they put you through the first day.
Yes. Like, so
Got it.
I'd probably simmer on that, unfortunately.
All right. So now this is a silly example, but you think about it. What actually happened the first day, literally, and what literally happened the second day? And let me answer that. The first day, you went to work and no one spoke to you, no one acknowledged you. That's it. That's what happened. That's literally what happened. The second day, people spoke to you and acknowledged you. All right, so this is pointing to something that's very subtle, but happens so instantaneous for us that we fail to see that the interpretation that we bring to something, it gets collapsed to the occurrence. All right, so if you were just going to be very clinical about it and your friend asked you what happened, well, I went to work and no one said a damn thing to me all day and I just worked and that's it. The second day, you know, you would have said what you would have said. But where do all those other thoughts come from? You know, where, you know, this place is effed up, someone said. I'm not coming back the next day, someone said. Where did all that come from? Did it come from what actually happened or what you brought to the table?
What you brought to the table.
Well, that's my assertion. And as I always do in trainings, I'm just going to ask you guys to consider the things that we're saying, to try them on and see how they live. Because see, if this is true, then this is an expression of how we're always living in an internal conversation about how things should be and how things shouldn't be. And when things are the way they should be, I'm happy, people love me, blah, blah, blah. When things aren't the way they should be, we usually go to what's wrong with these people, or what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with this place, right? So this is an eternal dynamic that's never going away. I'll never forget, for instance, for myself, when I was first learning to lead trainings. So I was leading a particular segment. There was about 120 people in this training. And it was the type of training that we have where everybody's seated in rows facing the front. And because there was that many people, I was on a platform. And my mentor was sitting all the way in the back of the table where the team sits. And everybody was facing front, so no one could see him, but I could. So I was leading the segment, and all of a sudden I saw my mentor put his hands on his head and put his head down on the table, very dramatically. And instantaneously, all my internal conversations that I already lived in already just got like splashed right into my face. Internal conversations of like, you know, am I adequate? Am I doing a good job? Are people going to like me? You know, these are questions that I've lived in as long as I can remember. So anyway, it threw me for a loop. This was a segment where there was no interaction. It's a lecture type segment. So I had to keep going, and somehow I did. And so on a break, I approached my mentor and I said, hey, you know, when you put your hands on your head and you put your head down on the table, you know, what was I missing? And what he told me was this one little tiny insignificant thing that he thought would have really even made it better what I was doing. But see, I interpreted it through my filters, through my conversation that I live with in every day. And so notice how those ramifications can play out when you're with someone that you're significant, you know, that's significant to you, when you really want to be accepted or really want to do a good job. Many of you are, you know, confined together with people. And I wonder how your internal conversations distorts, you know, some of the things that you hear and causes you not to hear certain things as well. So those are just things. Now, so there's many reasons to be communicating and be with people. And if I'm with people in order to be affirmed, to be well thought of, to, you know, to build me up and stuff like that, then they're not really people for me, are they? They're like a utility. They're someone that I'm using in order for me to gain what I feel I lack. And that's been living in me for a very long time. And it's something that I always got to keep on top of, because it can happen in any instance. If I'm leading a training, if I'm having a conversation with Dawn, if I'm having a conversation with my kids, with my colleagues, at any time. So I really got to keep guard of that, because it all begins with a conversation. And Taylor, I'm going to hand this next part off to you, and then I'll take over when you're done, and we'll do a couple more exercises together.
Okay. I love that example that you shared, because I imagine at some point that will be me seeing you and Chris in the back of the room, and I'll be in my own conversation for whatever you guys are doing in the back that's making me think about what's going on in my head. So I love that example, because I think it's a great way for us to start noticing our internal conversations. And I want to shift it a little bit right now, more towards the present moment. You know, we're in the midst of this unprecedented health pandemic. And I know personally for me, since Ennio and I have started talking about everything as a conversation, I've realized how many conversations that I'm living in and how many conversations the person I'm in conversation with is living in. So I think they're everywhere. But shifting more to the present tense, will you consider the internal conversations that you're having about right now? So whatever you're resisting in this present circumstance. So I want you to think about what that current circumstance is, and I'm just going to run through a couple questions. And if you want and you feel willing, you can kind of like raise your hand or just acknowledge that this question applies to you. If not, no problem. But I'm just curious, how many of you have lost your job as a result of this? Okay, thank you for sharing. How many of you are working from home for the first time? Okay. How many of you are homeschooling your children for the first time? Yeah. How many of you are afraid of getting the virus, or maybe not that getting the virus, but the consequences that the virus could have on your life, like having to be in quarantine and not see your family or anything like that? How many of you are struggling to be in quarantine with the people that you're currently living with? Okay. And, you know, I wonder how many of you are maybe feeling disappointed or frustrated about plans or events in your life that have been postponed or canceled because of this? For sure. So I think that's just evidence of the reality that we're in a unprecedented circumstance. On a personal note, for me, you know, my husband is a firefighter. And so this circumstance has created a lot of fear for me and anxiety that was kind of already present as a result of his job. You know, he's running calls on patients, and some of them have been positive for the virus. And, you know, it makes me fearful to kiss him. It makes me afraid of what it would be like for him to have to quarantine, or for both of us, or if our family got sick. And on top of that, I'm a mother to 2 young kids. So I'm at home with my kids, who I normally try and get out as much as possible and exercise them and socialize them. We just moved back to Phoenix 5 days before this whole campaign started. So we've been in the process of trying to find a place to live in the midst of everything kind of being shut down. And then finally, for me as an apprentice, every opportunity that I had this spring to participate in trainings with people has been canceled. And so I've just started noticing all these conversations that I'm living in. And I'm going to share them with you in hopes of kind of getting you thinking about the conversations that you're in. So regarding my husband's job, I live in this victim mindset most of the time. It's not just now, but specifically now, I hear myself saying, yep, here we go. Fire family is always getting the short end of the stick. Like, Everybody's at home with their families, and I'm sending my husband off to work knowing that the implications of that are really serious. With my kids, the conversation that I'm in is, I don't have enough patience. I don't have what this takes. I can't do this any longer. I can't make one more day. I can hardly survive this afternoon. I'm not competent. I'm not patient enough. And then a lot of like stuckness of like, there's no point in working hard anymore. The trainings are canceled, woe is me. So this is a lot of the conversations that I've been having on top of like, living with my parents right now as we've been trying to find a place to stay and, all these conversations, right? So I want you to consider your current circumstance, right? Some of you have lost jobs, you're working from home, you're homeschooling your kids. I want you to ask yourself, what judgments or assessments are you making about your current circumstance? So by judgment, I mean, are you deciding what's good or bad, what's right or wrong? And that can be about working from home. That can be about the way the government's handling it, the way your community is handling it, the way the people in your life are handling it. Are you judging yourself or maybe other people for how they're participating? Are they quarantining? Are they not quarantining? Right now, maybe you're asking yourself, am I competent to work from home? Am I competent to homeschool my kids? Can I handle this? Or maybe you've assessed the relationships that you're in with people. Are the people you live with, are they never going to change? Is this how things always go and now you're stuck with them? Are your conversations around what should be happening or the way things are supposed to be? Or maybe they go something like, of course they're being like that. It's so like them. They're always quarantined. But the reality is we're in a lot of these conversations, whether we're in a health pandemic or not. These are the conversations that we exist in all the time. And Proverbs 23:7 says, as a person thinks, so they are. Or another translation I found even uses the word calculates. So as a person calculates in his soul, so he is. So as I live in assessment of myself and calculate,
Uh-oh, she's frozen.
like I'm a victim of judgment and assessment, I'm actually creating that future for myself. So the more I tell myself a victim, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Now we can.
My thing came up and said it was unstable. What part did you lose me at?
We just lost about 10 seconds.
Okay.
So in the last minute or so.
Okay.
You can continue, yeah.
So what I was asserting is that as I'm living in these judgments and assessments, I'm actually creating that future for myself. So the more I tell myself I'm a victim, the more of a victim I become. The more I tell myself I can't handle this, I can't do it, the more I bring that into fruition. And it's important to recognize that any action we take is always congruent with how we see things, or to say it another way, how they occur to us, or the conversation that we're having about it. So the actions we take are always tied to how something occurs to us. And how something occurs to us is a combination of the past, which explains why things are the way they are. So that's our experience, our evidence. And the anticipation of the future. So what our actions are leading us to, or what we expect based off of our past experience. So there's usually never any exception to this. And one of the things that's been really helpful to me is a practice that we use on our teams. So one of these practices is, what is the vision for my life right now? And then when we have a vision, we consider two factors. One, what attitudes will get in the way of me having this vision and creating this vision? And the second one is, what resourceful attitudes will support me in creating my vision? So I'm going to share an example for myself, and then we'll have an opportunity to have one or two people walk this out in their circumstance. So the vision I have for myself in this season is to be a supportive wife, because obviously this is very stressful for my husband as well. I want to enjoy this season with my kids as much as possible. I want to use this pause in the canceled trainings as an opportunity to study and develop myself as an apprentice, even without the trainings. And I want to be a support and encouragement to my friends and neighbors. So I kind of already discussed the attitudes that are getting in the way for me, things like my victim mindset or scarcity conversations about having what it takes, some of my sadness or my anxiety. So the resourceful attitude that I need to shift from being a victim to Nathan's job would be adopting gratitude. Because one of the things that I've realized as I've been working through these conversations is that it really is a privilege to have a job right now. And not only to have a job, but to have a job that has so much security for us. We're financially secure. He's not going to lose his job. If anything, they're calling him forth into more responsibility at a time like this. And so when I shift from a victim to having gratitude, I realize actually what a privilege his job is. No matter what happens with his health or my health over the next few weeks, I know that we're going to be taken care of. And with my fears and my anxieties, I shift that into holding myself as able and competent. And when I catch myself saying, we can't do this, and what will we do, and how will I go about it, I have to shift my attitude towards, I am competent, and I am able, and God will provide for me, and my support system will provide for me, and I will be able to do it. So, and same thing with my kids, shifting from, I don't have enough patience, I can't do this, into, I can do this, and I will do this. And not only that, but I've been asking myself the question, what do I want my legacy to be at the end of this season at home with my kids? And that shift has even opened up creativity to things like building a volcano. And we set all his little cars up and did a car wash and trying science projects. So all these scarcity conversations that I were having were creating this outcome of anxiety and panic and disappointment. And not that those things don't still come up for me, but as I notice myself in those conversations, I ask myself what attitude would help support this vision that I have for myself of how I want to be. So if anybody's willing, what we can do is have someone volunteer, and what I'll ask you to do is share the vision you have for yourself right now, and then address some of the attitudes or internal conversations that you're having that aren't creating what you're wanting. They're not creating your vision. And then consider what resourceful attitudes that you can have. So if anybody wants to volunteer.
Yeah, I got it. So the way I view myself right now, or the way it's what we want to view ourselves as, right?
Yes, the vision for your life.
Right. I guess stable.
Okay. And what does stable look like for you?
I honestly don't know, but I kind of know what the feeling is.
Okay. And what's the feeling?
I guess feeling like I can do something. Like right now, I feel like I cannot do things that I want to do. Like I'm just kind of, I lack, what is it? Oh, right. Self-control or drive. I just feel like I don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to.
Yeah. So even as I'm listening to you, you're in a conversation already.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So
that's one of the many.
Yeah, totally. So how could you shift into a conversation that would allow you to have new possibility?
Well, I guess it would be the opposite of that, more or less. That I can do it. That I can do what I want to do. That there are things that I want to do, that I do have drive.
Mm-hmm.
And that I can do it. That's it.
Yeah, totally. It's just holding yourself as able.
Believing.
And believing in yourself. How would having that internal conversation shift into changing your vision to getting the things done that you want to get done right now?
Be more action focused, I think, instead of feeling like I can't perform actions or can't do the things I want to do, like, I don't know, spend time doing something productive. Instead of thinking that I can't do it, just do it. Or believe that I can do it. And that's why I do it. It's very confusing for me.
Yeah, I hear that. But so it's just be willing to notice that you're in a conversation with yourself about it. And so as we were talking about earlier, whatever that conversation is for you, however you're occurring to yourself is going to lead you to act out and create the vision that you have in that way, right?
Absolutely. That is always true.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Greg.
You're welcome.
Is anyone else?
I'll go.
Hi.
Hi. So the vision I have for myself is somewhat similar. I have a stable job that sustains my, my lifestyle, and I'm just married and enjoying grandchildren and things like that.
So is there a vision that you have for how you want to be through this season?
Yeah, it's just a positive influence in the people that I'm with and that I'm around via Zoom meetings and whatever. Just, someone that is supportive of others and yeah.
Thanks. That's a great vision. I love that. So what do you think the internal conversation is that you're having that might be getting in the way of that?
I'm stuck in my room. The cats even have me hold it hostage. I can't even open my door because I'm sitting in this room all by myself and woe is me, woe is me.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. So what conversation or what attitude shift might open up for more possibility for you?
More like an attitude of the world is my oyster. I can reach out to people via all kinds of media. I can actually open my door and go out. I can put the cats in their room instead of put me in my room. But mostly I can reach out to other people and and I can create my own Zoom meeting if I wanted to. I can there's all kinds of ways to communicate. I can write letters. I can call people, email people. There's just many ways to get in touch with people and be a part of their life positively.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of possibility that would open up for you. And one of the things that occurred to me while you were talking is we talk a lot about have tos over choose tos, get tos.
Yeah.
And I think one of the shifts Brandon and I were just talking this week about is, this phrase like I'm stuck at home, and even just shifting that to like I'm safe at home, or I get to be home, or I choose to be home.
Yeah.
Just that small shift in how you're having that conversation can just really open up possibility for you. So Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so encouraging.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to flip it over to Ennio.
Thank you. Excellent job, Taylor. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I love the phrase that you used, Taylor, about, we always act in congruence, total congruence with how something occurs to us. And that's true. That's certainly true about ourselves. It's also true about other people. So think about it. How other people occur to you will dictate your mood, your actions, your words towards them, all right? So once again, I'm going to lead us in just a little visualization exercise, all right? So if you just kind of close your eyes, and with your eyes closed, I'd like you to see a person in your life that you have the most conflict with.
Mm.
You instantly know who that is. You know who I'm talking about. And as you see them in yourself, what's between the two of you? What have you decided is between the two of you? What conflict is between the two of you? Is not the conflict an unfinished conversation? Or perhaps one that differentiates what each of you value? Or an offense that's not been reconciled? An expectation that's not met? Now, with that person in mind, imagine how you'll navigate yourself through any encounter you have with them. For instance, imagine that you have to go to a big family gathering, they're part of the extended family and they're going to be there. Before you even get there, how can you see yourself positioning yourself towards them? Will you try to stay as far away from them as possible so you don't have to have this conversation? Will you find others that you already know feel the same way about that person? Will you be socially, cordially hypocritical? Have that smile, but not really engage? Will you tell them off? And if that's hard for you to imagine this one. Consider that you hear the phone ring and someone else answers your phone and they inform you that it's so-and-so. You know so-and-so. You have a hard time with this person. Before you even pick up the phone, depending on how they occur to you, what are you already thinking? What's the conversation you're already having? And notice how that conversation, that internal conversation, will affect your attitude, your mood, your tone. What may cause you not even to hear? What if they're calling to really extend a heartfelt, offer of reconciliation and forgiveness, or asking for forgiveness from you? See, it all begins with a conversation you hold within yourself, one that's not been completed, or it's been collapsed from an occurrence or many occurrences. Let's be honest, there's many occurrences that cause us to have these internal conversations. Now, for those of you that haven't guessed, and I'm sure almost all of you have, these conversations turn into judgments, don't they? I like the word conversation, though, because a conversation is something that can be shifted. A judgment can also be worked through, and the way to really work through a judgment is empathy, to really see life through their eyes and have some empathy for what they're going through. But a conversation is something that could be shifted pretty easily. And so, as has already been mentioned, those actions, those thoughts are always going to be congruent with how something occurs to you. Now, most of you have heard the translation of John 1 that starts with, "In the beginning was the Word," right? So go ahead and open your eyes. I'm going to share the screen again. I'd like to share something with you. And can you see it?
No.
Okay,
Not yet.
well, I'm still learning this thing. Here we go, share. Here we go. All right. So most of you have heard the translation of John 1. It starts with, in the beginning was the Word, or sometimes translated Logos. And there is a Dutch philosopher named Erasmus of Rotterdam, who is a Christian scholar, and he's widely considered to have been one of the greatest scholars of the Northern Renaissance. And he was originally trained as a Catholic priest. I'm just reading this. Erasmus was an important figure in classical scholarship. Erasmus did not translate logos as word, but as conversation. And with that in mind, read this translation that someone else made based on that. John 1, 1 through 14. It all arose out of a conversation within God. In fact, the conversation was God. So God started the discussion, and everything came out of this, and nothing happened without consultation. There was the life that was the light of men, shining in the darkness, a darkness which neither understood nor quenched its creativity. John, a man sent by God, came to remind people about the nature of the light so that they would observe. He, John, was not the subject under discussion, but the bearer of an invitation to join in. The subject of the conversation, the original light, came into the world that had arisen out of his willingness to converse. He fleshed out the words, but the world did not understand. He came to those who knew the language, but they did not respond. Those who did became a new creation, his children. They read the signs and responded. These children were born out of sharing of the creative activity of God. They heard the conversation still going on here now and took part, discovering a new way of being people. To be invited to share in a conversation about the nature of life was for them a glorious opportunity not to be missed. I just love that translation. It has so many possibilities. And if you think about it, when we're called upon in this life to create flourishing, it's exactly what arose out of the Trinity, right? They had this conversation about how they were going to create us and what we were up to and stuff like that. And I just love that example. I think if we could take part in that discussion and bring our own unique flavor to it, you know, without all the judgments, without all the things that undermine us, without all the things that sabotage us, you know, whether it's an internal conversation, a judgment about myself that I picked up who knows where, you know, I mean, I have a pretty good idea of where I've picked it up. But, you know, most of these negative conversations, you know, like Wendy asked a bunch of you to raise your hand. How many of you have an internal critic that talks a lot? Just raise your hand. All right, so the internal critic is actually trying to serve you. It's trying to serve you from being hurt again. The problem is that it also keeps you from being a full expression of who you're called to be. Someone who has never been and will never be again. So consider the conversation you have about yourself, and it can vary widely, you know. Some people are really arrogant, thinking, you know, they're the cat's meow. And others, you know, are the harshest critic of themselves. And therefore, they just play it very safe. However you carry yourself, though, it began as a conversation, as an interpretation, I mean, out of an incident that turned into a conversation. I just ask you to consider that. It's not reality, it's not true, except that our brain has this uncanny ability to always find evidence to support what we believe is true. And it doesn't take much. There was someone that you like and admire and stuff like that, and maybe they raise an eyebrow, and just out of that one little raised eyebrow, this whole thing can come cascading upon you like, oh, I knew it. I knew they didn't really think I was much or something. You know how it goes. So as we're bringing this to a close, I'd like some thoughts from you, and then I'm just going to give you some considerations when we sign off to just continue working this on your own. And York, I love your suggestion. We're going to try to figure out a way to do that. So what comes to mind throughout this whole discussion that we've been having since we began, me and Wendy, and your own internal conversation? What's opening up? What questions do you have?
I have a question.
All right. Hey, Jeff.
You mentioned the internal critic is trying to do what? What did you say?
Trying to keep you safe.
Trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that? Because I'm
well,
not.
Sure. Think about it. So think about it. It's like, you know, you're called on to give a big speech, right?
Okay.
And your internal critic says, oh man, you're not very good at this. You know what? People are going to judge you probably, and you're not going to be able to pull it off, and you're probably going to blow your chance, blah, blah, blah. So let me ask you, Jeff, how is that a version of trying to keep you safe?
It's trying to protect me from failure.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So there's many variations of that, but usually the criticism that you have about yourself is born out of this whole idea of when something went wrong in life, we go to one of these three defaults. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? Or what's wrong with it? It being whatever. Family, the society, the culture, the church, the workspace, the marriage. I mean, you know, it's always where we go. We don't usually, and we think when we ask what's wrong with me, we think we're taking responsibility, but we're really not, because we're not inquiring into what's missing of the other person. You know, and so often I have found this to be so true. I remember one time I was involved in a project, and all of a sudden, project went on, and without me being included in part of it, and my internal critic said, I guess I'm just not worth it to them, right? And I finally mustered up the courage to specifically ask what happened. And it was just actually a just logistical thing that happened. It was not at all meant the way I was interpreting it. Mm-hmm. So very often, you know, even the conversations that have you stuck, they're really openings. And those of you that have been to our trainings know that we believe this with all that we are. You know, the places that you're stuck, the feedback that you don't like, the things that, you know, happen, those are openings if you dare have the courage to enter into them. So thanks for asking that question, Jeff.
Sure, Ennio.
Anybody else?
I had a thought while Jeff was talking real quick. You know, as I've been in conversation with people this week, everything as a conversation has been on the forefront of my mind. And one of the things I noticed about our conversations, it occurred to me that it's really similar to this idea that our internal conversations are almost revealing what our intentions are. So if I'm having a conversation that's saying, I'm going to fail at this, and then I fail at it, I get to be right that I was going to be a failure. And then there's no risk for me involved. So I get the results that I want. It's based on the conversation I'm having. If I say I'm not patient and then I show up impatient with my kids, I'm like, see, there I am. I'm not patient. So it's this perpetuating cycle. So that was just something that came up for me as one way that the internal conversation plays out and how we actually act out things in the world.
We really pull the curtain back on that one in the reInvent training. Those of you who have not been to that or haven't been to it in a while, come. There's a lot to see there. Very well put. Any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, this is Liz. Something that I was thinking about, or that came to me when Greg was speaking in particular, and just kind of like, I've taken what Taylor was talking about and just stopping my conversation and asking myself why I'm kind of digging more into why I'm thinking or saying or responding the way I'm responding. Something that's really helped me in putting out a vision of what I want to do and what's holding me back is identifying like any past stuff that I maybe realized I haven't been addressing yet or thought I had processed, And turns out, you know, this situation recreated something that kind of it roared or reared its ugly head, whatever the thing is. And so I've definitely dealt with that. Living alone, I feel like I'm just trapped with just my own brain, and feeling out of control. And then I realized that I was having an internal conversation about that. And then I was able to stop myself and say, okay, what's so bad about being out of control? Where does that come from? Why, like, kind of pulling that apart a little bit, I think has been helping me to then be able to shift into that future, kind of like getting to the other half of what Taylor was talking about. So I don't know if that's helpful to anybody else, but that's definitely been what it's been like.
That's great. If I had to put that in my own words, it's you know, disengaging from having your past dictate your future to having your vision dictate your future. And that's a powerful shift.
Yeah, that's good.
Someone else. Thank you very much, Liz.
I had a question for Taylor, just thinking about what is my vision, and this is going to give away a little bit of my internal thoughts, but my first thing is, like, I feel like I have everyone else's vision placed on me, and I'm newly married, a new mom, and I feel like, how do I discern what's actually my vision and not someone else's?
Well, after about 60 years of being married, you still won't know what that is. So.
Yeah, well, and throw in being a new mom in the midst of this. One of the things I have felt to be so true for myself as a mother is living in the shoulds and the ought tos, and what's good and right for your kids and what's bad and what's wrong for your kids. And how old is are your children?
She's 1 and expecting a second.
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations, Martha.
I have a 1-year-old as well, and this one has felt so different to me because I went through 4 years with my son of working myself through each of those conversations. I honestly feel like it's life, it's experience, it's practice. You know, we're doing a lot on the Instagram about like meditation and breath work. And so I don't know, like sitting down and being prayerful about it and putting some practice in and figuring out what gives you life and what your gut tells you and what your heart tells you and what your spirit tells you. I mean, that's your vision is so personal to you, you know, and I think it's just really like, what are you wanting to create in your relationships? What are you longing for in your life? What are you longing for in your marriage? And what do you want your legacy to be as a mom? And just asking yourself some of those questions, I bet some of that will start to bubble up from the surface. But it is true. It's like you're in your conversation and then they're having a conversation with you and then you have a conversation about that. So it takes a lot of effort to really start to work through the weeds on all of that.
And your mom probably is still talking in your head about how you should be and all this. I mean, it's just a lot. Very well put, Taylor. Thank you so much. Someone else? We'll have time for one more, and then I'm just going to give you a couple considerations.
I'll go.
Right.
This Kim, and so during this time of the pandemic and being at home, I've created a vision for myself that I want to be a peaceful warrior for my family and provide purpose and direction. And in the midst of that, I have all of these internal conversations that I feel everything less than peaceful. And I don't even know what on earth I'm doing, let alone helping everyone else have a sense of direction and purpose. But I was just thinking about the, attitudinal shifts with even just something so simple as I'm stuck here versus I am safe and I choose to be here. And the freedom that when you really live in that this is a choice and I am protecting my family and we have lots of opportunities to get outside and there's so much freedom that, and it's all a matter of attitude and perspective. And just thinking about people like Viktor Frankl and in concentration camps and things like that. I mean, there's just so many opportunities. So I'm going to be meditating on freedom, and instead of feeling trapped.
That's great, Kim. And I don't think you were able to see him. You should have seen Sam nodding his head. It was like, so he's going to be happy about that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's a lot here to consider, to chew on. There's a lot of unique conversations that we have, and a phrase I often like to use, they're uniquely the same. I mean, we're human beings. And so those are always going to be there. So now, the last thing I'd like you to consider is the conversation to actually do a reverse engineering to get to the conversation that you're having, starting with the actions, the moods, just the internal feelings that you have when you think about engaging someone, right? So, because they could just be so present that that's just, quote, how it is for you. But if it all begins with a conversation, there's the possibility to do a reverse engineering on that and actually get to what is it that would need to be cleared, you know, on my part. See, this is always our internal conversation, because I'll tell you what won't work is if you approach someone and you're trying to get them to account for themselves, right? So, but what do you want to open up? And what shift will take in you for you to open it up? So at reInvent, we endeavor. I love that line in that translation that I read to you. We endeavor to discover new ways of being people. We don't have to be conformed, you know, to how it always is and it always has been and stuff. We can actually bring, you know, we can bring some reflection of that original light. And it starts with creating flourishing. And I'll tell you what, nothing will create flourishing like shifting those conversations from ones that hamper you and hold you back to ones that open you up. You know, whether it's opening you up for feedback so you can find places to shift, or whether it's opening you up to courageously take on things that you've been afraid of. You know, the harsh critic is not going to shut up. However, you don't have to listen to them. You don't have to listen to them. So this is an important element of creating flourishing. That's what we're all called to as God's children. And each one of you have a unique offering for this world that never was and never will be again. I don't know how to convey that in such a way that you really own that. Like if you really believe that, how would you live? How would you shift? So that's my encouragement to you. Taylor, you did a fabulous job. Thank you so much for what you shared. Thank you for everyone that was willing to share what they were thinking. And more than anything, I'm thankful for you being part of our community and jumping in on this call tonight. And hope to see you all again soon. And hopefully we'll get our trainings back on the books too. That would be nice, because that's how things should be. All right.
All right. So we'll see you next week. And next week, we're going to get into how to get to being present, how to get to acceptance. We'll send an email out with some stuff on it. But last week we talked about acceptance and how do you get that pulled off. So we're going to look at that next week. These are all things designed just to really support us in these challenging times. Great job, Ennio and Taylor. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Anything else y'all want to close with?
Thank you guys so much for letting me share.
Yep. Jane and Kristen, thank you for helping put this together. Chris, thank you for hosting it. And we shall be in touch soon.
We'll see y'all next week. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Ennio.
All right.
Hi guys.
Bye.
Love you all.
Hey, everyone.
Good night. Hi. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. Thank you.
Great. Good night.